I am proud to say that I have been told I have scared John Carpenter with my illustrations. That's a little, which is pretty awesome.
I'm Kat Staggs, comic book illustrator. I'll be drawing Captain Marvel.
Currently, right now, I'm working on, for John Carpenter, working on 2 different short stories for his Tales for Halloween Night. The 5th anniversary edition anthology will be coming out in September, just in time for Halloween. And every year I do the New York Comic Con variant cover, which is only sold in New York, which is really fun. And then the 2nd series of Crosswind with Gail Simone, which is a book we did for Image that came out last year. And she is working on the scripts for season 2. And that has also been optioned for TV, so hopefully that will happen soon as well. I will pencil out what I'm going to do, figure out the pose and whatnot. I have a 3D modeler, sometimes I'll use for lighting if I want something really dramatic. It also helps make it consistent if you're doing multiple characters in one piece and you want to keep the lighting all the same. And then a pencil, and then I usually just dig in to the coloring. Most of the work I do, I tend to split between traditional and digital. I'll do a traditional gray tone piece and scan it in, and then do all colors and effects and stuff like that digitally. Tends to make the process a little faster. Right now I'm just laying in my shadows and I will build out from them. I mostly use Copic markers. It's just a tool I've used for a long time. They tend to blend a lot like watercolor, and they have a little more control than when I use a paintbrush. It's just one of my favorite tools. Most people tend to shy away from giving female characters any kind of shadow. Tend to keep them very, very clean. I like to do dramatic shadows for females as well. I think it's fun, and why not? It's not like we don't catch light either. The fun part about using the gray paper is half the work is done when you start it, and you just have to find all the middle and darks and lights. I started in trading cards, doing trading card art for tops for various properties. I did mostly Star Wars, but also did some Marvel and DC, and I did a lot of one-off illustrations for Lucasfilm and some work on the website. Used to have a how to draw kids section, and we would do instructional illustrations on breakdowns and how to draw, Star Wars characters and whatnot. And ended up getting a chance to work with DC through that. I was asked to do some pages, and then that led to my first book for them was Phantom Lady and Doll Man. It was written by Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray, which then led to Smallville Season 11, which ran for 3.5 years. It was phenomenal, written by Brian Q. Miller. That book I absolutely loved. It was a continuation of the show, basically, but it was a Superman book, which was a dream come true for me. It was Smallville with no budget, with, we could do whatever we wanted. It was great. I loved that I ended up being able to check off all the DC superheroes I've always wanted to draw in one project. I did 40 different covers for that series. I drew 2 of the stories. Brian is a phenomenal writer. He was familiar with it. He wrote on the show, so he was familiar with that particular story. And it ended up being a Justice League book by the end. I mean, it was a dream come true. I got to design Supergirl's costume, which I still pinch myself over. I designed some mech suits. I designed the Teen Titans characters, costumes. It was just such a dream come true project. My mom got me into comics, actually. When she was a kid, her father owned a newsstand, and she used to go in and grab the new comics, bring them back to her room and read them, and then bring them back and put them back on the shelf. And so when I was a kid, she bought me the comics. Some of them I still have. One I loved was one of those Power records that came with a read-along comic. It was a Batman one. I still have it. As soon as my daughter's a little older, I'll probably pull it out and we'll read through it together. She'll probably really enjoy it. She's getting into this stuff too. It's fun. So now, I'm just I laid down my tone for the face, and I'm just gonna tighten up the outside and then get the body in there, and then come back and put some highlights on here and hopefully make the lighting make sense. I usually tend to start with either the eyes or the nose. If those aren't right, then the whole thing's gonna be off. My first job in comics was actually Phantom Lady and Doll Man for DC. I was asked by Jim Lee to submit some things, and he then found the project. It was nice to, cut my teeth on that one. Jimmy's a great friend. He's a great writer, so it was really fun. I worked with an inker on that one, and that was my first time doing that. So I had to remember that he's not in my brain, and I had to, make everything really clear of my intention. That was my biggest learning curve. Comics is a collaboration. We're all trying to achieve the same goal at the end, is to have a cohesive book. Basically, it's a team. You need to communicate with people. Eventually, if you work with someone enough, you'll develop a shorthand, so you won't have to, be so detailed. But yeah, when you're starting off with new people, it's best to, have email chats if you can, or phone chats, and communicate the end result you're trying to make if you can't achieve that with, certain markers on the page. And, as with anything, it's studying the craft itself. Because the more you know, then the easier it'll be for everyone else. If you don't know what you're doing, it's going to show. Especially if you work with people who do know what they're doing. It's really hard to fake your way through this because you're working on it with a team. Everybody has to respect each other's time and in the process. And that usually tends to be the biggest complaint I see or hear from people is, the writer took too long, the inker took too long, or the colors took too long, or, it's like I said, it's a team and you have to respect each person's process. My biggest learning curve is when I worked on Crosswind and my first couple of Halloween night stories, I was coloring my interior work for the first time. And so that was a learning curve. And to some degree, I'm still learning, always learning. That's an ongoing learning process. You also don't want to get too complacent in your work. If you get too complacent, then you're never going to get better. And sometimes people can stand to get better. I know I can always stand to get better. I'm very proud of the work I did on Crosswind. I'm really proud of the Supergirl costume. Like I said, I still pinch myself that I got to do that. I still can't believe I got to design Supergirl's costume, in canon. But yeah, Crosswind, for those that aren't aware, it's a body swap story. It's a Chicago hitman who's very good at his job, very well respected, and very privileged, and a suburban Seattle housewife who is in an abusive relationship, has no confidence, is hated by her stepson. One day they just switch, a la Freaky Friday, and they wake up in each other's body, and they don't know why or how it happened, and they have to figure out first who they are, where they are. Then as the story progresses, they have to live this person's life and try and figure out how to get back to their own. Also not get caught. Because as it turns out, the mob figures it out and is then trying to kill them. So they have to try not to get caught, try not to get killed, and get back to their own lives. The biggest challenge for that one was I had a male and a female. They switch. So when I'm drawing it, if I can't convey, the biggest challenge was still conveying that this is still a woman even though we're looking at a man, and this is still a man even though we're looking at a woman. I had to convey the mannerisms. So it was a huge study in human mannerisms for me when I got to do it. It was very exciting. I ended up making a list of works for each one of them that I carried over once the transformation happened. Things like one of them was left-handed, one of them was right-handed. Her posture was very, meek. She had no confidence whatsoever, so I had to carry that over to him in his world, his body, so that you still realize that you're looking at Juniper rather than Kaysen. And so so I had a list, and I had to keep track of that list as I went. It got easier, when I got to like issue 4 or 5, it got easier I was more used to it. But the first couple of issues were a huge challenge. If I didn't pull that off, I don't think the story would have worked. So I worked really, really hard on conveying the switch. I thought it was just as important as the words on the page to realize you're still looking at a man and you're still looking at a woman, even though physically they look different. There's one panel where, while in his body, she has just gotten out of the shower, and I still have the towel wrapped up here and holding it like this. It was little things like looking at how a man would hold something versus how a woman would hold something. And her hair was always very haggard and all over the place, and he was always very put together. And so when they switched, her body started to be more put together and his hair started getting more messed up, and it would fall on his face more, and it was little things like that I tried to convey. I do that already, but yeah, I was It was like hyper vigilant. I was just like how that guy walks and how that woman walks and how that guy's drinking his coffee and how that woman's drinking her coffee. You know, it was just, I feel like it made me a better artist, paying more attention to detail like that. I tend to be a stickler for detail, but it really was essential to making that book work. It was a lot to sell. Research is key, absolute key, whatever project you're doing. Like this story I'm working on, the sci-fi story I'm working on right now, part of it takes place in Cold War, the whole home bunker fascination, you know, everybody was building the bunkers in their backyard, you know, and researching all of that stuff, and a little bit of the propaganda around, you know, the ads to basically have some guy come build a bunker in your backyard for $800, you know, that kind of stuff. But yeah, getting to research all of that stuff. The research for an artist is just as important as it is for a writer. I mean, our drawings are essentially our writing, and their writing is essentially our art. It all works together. It's all storytelling. I'm Kat Staggs. I drew Captain Marvel.